So good evening everybody, and welcome to RunsWktsOvers, where tonight we're going to be looking at getting back to cricket, which is really exciting. So there's been some guidelines that have come out from both the ECB and ECB ACO with some good things in there to help us to get back to scoring in a safe environment, but they need a little bit of interpretation, and every club is different, so we need to work out how we're going to apply those to our particular club. So this evening I'm hoping that you're all going to do most of the work later on, and chip in with some really good ideas with how to interpret these, and show me what you've been doing at your club. Throw in some ideas that other people might not have thought of themselves. So hopefully you're going to all put in the chat window later on some good tips and tricks. So one of the things that we need to get used to, unfortunately, with scoring in this environment is, do you have your hand sanitizer? Take it to every game. Sanitize your hands before you start. So I'm almost ready to go. So my hands, nice and clean. Mask at the ready. I think I'm ready for scoring. Oh, my glass is fogged up. And cue. Yes, some of you might be scoring in that environment.
Haven't you got a tip for people who are wearing glasses and a face mask?
I do have a tip for people who are wearing glasses and a face mask, and it proved excellent in the hairdressers today, where I had to be dressed in this manner. Yes, if you get a folded up tissue, just get a piece of tissue, normal Kleenex or whatever tissue, fold it up and put it inside the mask, just over this top bit here, where it sits on your nose, and you can breathe as heavily as you like and your glasses don't fog up. It worked really well. Anyway, so that you can hear me more clearly, I'm going to take that off tonight. It is an option. Some people will want to wear one of those while they're scoring, but I will leave other suggestions like that to you. So the guidelines that came out, they came out on the 8th of July. Luke, could you show the front page of our screen? Thank you. They came out on the 8th of July. They have been updated today. So if you were working on the ones from the 8th, you need to get another copy of the updated ones from today. So the ECB ACO ones that you can see listed on the right have not been updated, but the ones on the left from the ECB have been updated with some feedback from some of the games that happened at the weekend. And also they've created an FAQ document, again with questions that have come in from the weekend, and that's also available. So I've put the updated version of the ECB document, the ECB ACO document and the FAQs all as links under the RunsWktsOvers video. So if you click on the show more option under the video, you will be able to access all those three guidelines. So we're going to look at both sets of guidelines, but only the bits that relate to scorers. So the ECB ones were for everybody involved in running a cricket match. So it's the club, the players, the coaches, the officials, and all sorts of people. And then the ECB ACO have honed in on the official side of things and given some more detailed information for officials. So we will spend most of our time looking at the ACO ones. Now, don't worry about all the small writing in the blue bit. I have cut and paste from the ECB document. I've cut and pasted the little bit that says prior to all cricket activity, and then picked out the salient points from that for scorers. So we have the expected items. Don't go to cricket if you or any of your household have any COVID-19 symptoms. And this is really important. We must adhere to that. So don't think, oh, we haven't got a scorer, I have to go. Please don't go if you have any of the symptoms. Consider the risk if you are in the vulnerable category. Consider the risk whatever category you're in. But again, don't feel that cricket is on and you have to go. Obviously wash your hands before you leave, and when you get home, that goes without saying. Bring your own sanitizer. Now that is important to point out, because don't expect that to be provided for you. Hand sanitizer needs to be part of your scoring kit now. There are more details in the next one as to what type of hand sanitizer it needs to be. But that should become part of your scoring kit. Travel alone where you can. So you shouldn't be car sharing and avoid public transport if you can. And the important bit that everybody should take notice of is only return to scoring if you want to. So that little bit at the bottom has come from the updated guidance today, where they have said that there is a risk, even with socially distance and taking precautions, so that all participants must be clear that they are opting in to participate. So do not be pressurised into going back. We're all really excited that cricket is back, but health is more important. So do not feel that you have to return at the moment. Okay, I just want to make that clear. So also in the ECB guidelines is a note that says a hygiene break should take place every 6 overs or 20 minutes, whichever is sooner, in which the ball is cleaned with antimicrobial wipe and all participants' hands are cleaned with a suitable sanitizer. So that bit has changed from antibacterial to antimicrobial. Microbial? Whatever.
Microbial.
Thank you, Luke. Microbial. Excellent. So how are we going to deal with the hygiene breaks? And the answer may be not at all. They're not overly important to scoring. You don't have to mark them if you don't want to. But we would normally mark drinks breaks and rain breaks. So if you do want to mark them, then I've got three different ways depending on some of the software or the methods of scoring that you're using. So on paper, in a box style book, I am suggesting that you just put a single line here against the batsman. So you do that on both the batsmen, just to show that there has been a break in the batsman's innings. And also a note in the notes section, although that notes section is going to fill up if they're having a breaks if they're having a break every 6 overs. So if you're using PCS Pro, you can use the play state option to put a break in play, but there is not a hygiene break on that menu. So if we just look at PCS Pro, here's a game in progress. I'd already put a rain break in, but let's just say we get to the 6th ball of the 6th over. So there are 6 overs. I would click on play state and just choose anything suitable from the menu. So you could put a drinks break in, you could just say that there is a break in play. So let's go with a general break in play. Now if you want to make that more relevant to the type of break, you can click in the note. If you double click in the note, then you can add to the note. So I could type hygiene break. We'll all be able to spell hygiene by the end of this. So we could just put hygiene break in play. What you also could do, if you wanted to, is to, once you've chosen a break in play, you can go back to the play state, and if you click on other and no play state at the bottom, then you can manually type where it says no play state. It doesn't mean that there isn't a play state, it is the state of no play. Why is there no play? So what you can do in there is just type hygiene break. And where that will go, it doesn't affect the innings notes. What it does affect are live scores. So if you are online and you are putting your data up to the Play Cricket site, then the status of the match at this point would say hygiene break. And we can see that at the bottom of the screen. So if you look at the bottom of PCS Pro, it does say hygiene break now.
We did just get asked, does PCS Pro stop the clock for a break like this?
Now that depends on which break you use. Some breaks stop the clock, rain stops the clock, and there are two different drinks breaks, one that does and one that doesn't. So they vary. And off the top of my head, I don't know whether the break in play does. I think it does, but I would need to double check that for you and come back to you. If you are using the PCS app, then what you need to click on is Actions, which is down in the scoring panel. It might be called Match Actions if you're using a tablet rather than a phone. And from the Match Actions menu, choose Break. Now, unfortunately, we don't have anything on this menu that relays back to any just generic break in play. So I think really the most suitable one would be drinks. And it doesn't make a particular note, so it doesn't really matter. You don't have to change it. I would say not to use lunch, tea or stumps, but you could put in bad light or rain if you really wanted to, but I guess from there the best option would be drinks. So the next note from the ECB one is that penalty runs may be awarded because there are a few new regulations. One of the regulations is that no sweat or saliva is to be applied to the ball at any time. Now, for people in club cricket, they might not realise that they can't put sweat on the ball, because if you've just watched the test match, you will have seen both sides using sweat. They were rubbing their foreheads, touching it on the ball to help to shine it. And the reason that they are allowed to do it, and in club cricket we're not allowed to do it, is that all those players have had many COVID-19 tests, daily health questionnaires and temperature checks before they are allowed onto the pitch. So they can be fairly sure that while they were out there on the pitch, they were fit and healthy and they did not have COVID-19. But with our club cricketers, they're not going through that regular testing. So the addition of no sweat as well as no saliva has been included. And it's 5 penalty runs to either side. It depends who applies the sweat or saliva to the ball, but you would expect the bowling side to supply that. So therefore, the penalty runs would be given to the batting side. The other reason for penalty runs in these new regulations includes some new lines that will be marked on the pitch. There are batting lines to be marked. It says distinct running lines should be marked within 2 metres of the bowler or other batter, and that the batsmen have to run between the lines or outside of the lines, rather than straight down the pitch. They need to keep away from the bowler. The lines may either be printed onto the pitch. You might get the groundsman out there with his white paint, or some clubs are using bowlers markers and that sort of thing, as long as you can see a line somewhere in the pitch. But if a batter breaks that regulation, that will be 5 penalty runs to the bowling side. And 5 penalty runs to the bowling side is quite rare. We don't get many of those. Usually in club cricket we might get 5 penalty runs for the ball hitting the helmet, or possibly a bit of deceptive fielding, but not usually to the bowling side. So this is how you would record it. I'm not going to go through in a huge detail because we did penalty runs in a previous session. So if you want to know in full detail, then I'm going to refer you back to the penalty run session. But very briefly, if you're adding, over on the left hand side, you're adding 5 penalty runs to the batting side, it very simply goes as 5 in the penalty extras column, and obviously 5 on the tally. If it's because of batters running not within the mark, it's adding 5 penalty runs to the fielding side, and that fielding side may have batted already, or they may not have batted already. So if they have already batted, then what you do is to move the target score on by 5 runs. So in my diagram, the original score was 172. We're moving it on to 177. If the bowling side have not already batted, then we hold those penalty runs and carry them forward to the start of the next innings by putting them in over 0 and crossing them off the tally. And whichever way you do it, I would put a dot, or if runs were scored off that delivery, the runs and a little P by it and a note to say when it happened. So that's paper penalty runs. With PCS Pro, we have the penalty button underneath the wicket button, and when you click on the penalty button, you can get a long menu, and you need to scroll to the bottom of the menu. Don't waste time just reading them all. If you scroll straight to the bottom, you will get other penalty awarded to the batting side and bowling side. Just make sure you pick the right one. So we'll have a very quick look at that in PCS Pro. So if I click on penalty, select penalty, and just scroll that bar to the bottom. You could, if you really wanted to, say that maybe somebody changed the condition of the ball, unfairly changing the condition of the ball. You could put that in for the saliva or sweat, and you could say that the batsman was damaging the pitch, but he hasn't really damaged the pitch. You could say he was in the protected area, but I think I would just scroll to the bottom and choose other and put Y in the notes. So I'll add one to the bowling side. Just make sure as well that you decide whether you're going to add it to the previous ball or not, depending on whether you've already recorded the runs that happened off that delivery. If you are using the PCS app, then once again we've got a button within our scoring panel, but this time it's the 5+ button. It isn't obvious that that's where penalty runs are, but if you touch the 5+ button, then as well as being able to add any number of runs that you want to, Down in the bottom of the menu, you have an option to select penalty runs either for the batting team or the bowling team. So again, very simply, just choose which of those it is. And in PCS, you can't choose any of the other options. It's just straight penalty runs either to the batting or the bowling side. So really, those guidelines are fairly straightforward. There's nothing to interpret in those. It's just a question of how to do it. In the rest of the ECB guidelines, scorers don't get much of a mention. They're concentrating more on the clubs and the players, and a little bit on the umpires. So what they do say are, if 2 scorers are required, social distancing must be maintained with only 1 official inside the box and no players allowed in the box. The scorer's box should be well ventilated, and communal scorebooks passed from one player to another should be avoided. And that would be an issue where you don't have a regular scorer and the players are scoring themselves, and they would normally just pass the book from person to person. So those days at the moment are past. We really need one person doing the scorebook. If you are the regular scorer, I would suggest you try and keep the scorebook for the rest of the season and don't keep passing it back to others. So there is a lot more detail in the ECB ACO guidelines, so that's where I want to focus. I don't want to get too hung up at the moment about the scorebox because we've got a lot more detail coming up.
Just before you move on to that, we have had a question. If penalty runs are awarded to the fielding side, which has already batted,
yes,
and DLS is in use, does
yes,
the par score chart then need to be reprinted?
Yes, it will. Yes, because you have changed the target score, the original target score. So yes, the par scores table will also change. Very good question. So moving on now to the ECB ACO regulations, and again, don't worry about reading the detail. If you want to read all that's in that blue background box, I suggest that you download your own copy and read it in details. So my notes from this is that they're very similar to the ECB ones in that they tell you not to travel to the game if you've got any symptoms, and that you bring your own hand sanitizer. Bring your own tea, we didn't mention from the previous ones. I actually think it was in there somewhere, but it's more noticeable in this one. So tea's not being provided. Do make sure that you take your own food. Leave your contact details at the ground for the NHS test and trace. So do please comply with that. But the biggest one here for scorers is that the club is responsible for changes to the scorebox. So point 5 there, the host club are responsible for the implementation of all facility guidelines, including the scorebox. And it does say as well as the provision of hand sanitation gel, but I would say you need to take your own hand sanitizer. So work with your clubs. Don't think that you just have to make the best of it. You need to get your club involved in giving you a safe environment to work in. And we'll have a look in a moment what a safe environment might look like. So, score boxes. Now, to make it a little easier, I've taken the white text to make it bigger. I've taken it off the blue background and I've just done a cut and paste. So this is the same text from that document. And it does say, where possible, score boxes should not be used. Now, this is where I really would welcome your input. So some of you have been to your clubs and had a look and tried to modify them for safe use. And some have actually used them last week. So I'd like some advice on how you've made your scorebox safe, and we'll make some notes of that in a minute. It does say maybe the host club should consider providing a gazebo, because it's definitely considered better that you are outdoors, so somewhere in the fresh air. So if your scorebox windows don't open, then you really do need to consider not being outside or not being inside the scorebox. Obviously, a great solution would be just to sit outside. Get a table or get 2 tables, socially distant, and sit outside. Sadly, that is probably not going to be good in either really warm weather and sunny weather or rainy weather, because you're either going to get a wet scorebook or a wet laptop, or you could end up not being able to see the screen if it's sunny. So it does say you can sit in the scorebox if it's large enough for 2 scorers. When interacting with any players, don't let the players in the scorebox, and keep socially distanced when interacting with other officials. Now, we have already got some suggestions for modification for scoring. So I have a wonderful picture here from Alison Gresser of Yorkshire, who is using a toilet tent, only because she happened to have one. It was a toilet tent that she bought for camping and never used, and it creates a wonderful little bubble for one person. So she's in there with her chair and her table and her laptop. So the sun is off her laptop because she's shielded by the tent. But it gives her protection from another scorer who might be in another tent next to her. I really love this idea. She happened to have the tent, so it was very useful. And a tent of that size that you would normally stand up in gives you room to see out. So a small pop-up tent that you would sleep in is not going to be suitable for sitting up in. But I love the idea. It's a really great idea.
You mentioned using the tent to distance yourself from other scorers. We did have a comment where somebody said this weekend they had one scorer in the scorebox and one sat just outside the scorebox, and that seemed to work well for them.
Yeah. That has been suggested. Probably the home scorer in the box, if that's where the scoreboard is operated from, and you are the person who's also operating the scoreboard, because you might not be operating the scoreboard. But yes, that would be a good idea.
And do we know where this tent came from? People are asking.
No, but I'm led to believe, because I saw her post this on social media originally, and then asked for her permission to be able to use it today. I believe it just came from camping suppliers, so that it's a fairly standard toilet tent that's used for camping.
Yeah, I'm sure any, go outdoors or a Blacks or a Trespass or something.
Yes, and I think Clive has just said Amazon. He's just bought one. Other providers are available. We've got the suggestion of a gazebo or garden tent. Yeah. Andy's saying last weekend they blocked off access to the scoreboard from one side and the front by roping it off. Okay, that's pretty good. Now, the other pictures we've got on the screen are from Mike Arnold from Harpenden Cricket Club. And you can see that he's actually installed some Perspex divider between the 2 scorers. So it's just at the back section, which is where you'd sit. So it sort of starts halfway down the bench and comes back out into the chair section, which would then cover the 2 faces, because that's what you're trying to do. Put a divider between your 2 faces. He tells me that the bench in the scorebox is 6 feet long, and therefore there would be room to sit a metre apart, I believe, which is acceptable with the screen. It wouldn't be acceptable without the screen. I'm not
Or
convinced.
indeed a mask.
Yes, or indeed a mask. So I'm not sure how many of you would have score boxes that are big enough for that, but it's an idea, and that's all we're trying to gather today, because we have to try and adapt our own environment the best we can. And I had an email also before the start from Keith Fuller, who's at Gotaker Cricket Club, and although he didn't send me pictures, he said that he had done similar. He has put a Perspex screen up in the score box, and he is going to contact the away scorer before each game to advise them what's happened, and say, are you comfortable sitting in that score box with the screen? So I'd like your ideas, which you're throwing in there now, and I'm going to attempt to put them on the screen. Now bear with me, because what I've got is a pen that writes on the screen, and this is the first time that I've used it, so the writing could be interesting. So what other ideas have we had? We've had roping off the scoreboard area, or roping the scoreboard box area off to create more space. I'm sorry if this looks like a 3-year-old wrote it. Okay, Luke, I'm relying on you really while I'm writing to tell me if there are other things I need to add to this.
Well, at the moment, it's a lot of discussion about how much toilet tents cost from different suppliers.
So we've got a tent, but tents are on the other screen as well, but I will put tents up here.
We've got a fisherman's tent.
Ooh.
We had the one person in the box, one person just outside.
Oh, yes. So if you're sitting outside and you are unable to get into the score box, hang on, one person in score box, there are other things then that need to be considered, like can you see your screen, or can you protect your scorebook? Have we got any suggestions for those?
So we've had a screens suggestion.
Yeah.
And we've had the crisp box over the laptop, so you can see your screen.
I have to say, the crisp box is just the best thing in the world. I actually have a little pop-up tent, not that I can sit in, but that my laptop fits in. It's they're designed for professional photographers to use, and I keep it in the back of my car, but I tend to use a crisp box if there's one. If you're scoring somewhere where there's a bar in a clubhouse, then get a crisp box. So yeah, you just empty the crisps out, put it on its side, and it's a great size for sliding the laptop back into. The flap sticks over a bit, or you can bend them back to keep the sun off, depending on the different angles. Crisp box for laptop protection. Yeah, look at that. It's dead cheap and it's great.
Somebody mentioned opening doors and windows in their box so that they could communicate fully with the other scorer. But it's also worth mentioning that if you can open doors and windows in your box to get the airflow through, that's meant to help.
Yes, I would not recommend sitting in a score box that the doors and windows don't open.
There's Paul Dean is suggesting that there are fold-up screens designed for photographers that are quite good for laptops that he uses.
Oh,
Apparently you can make a box out of 3 pieces of plywood painted black that makes a good screen. IKEA zip up storage box.
Oh, don't do that. Okay, bear with me. Oops, make a box out of plywood. My handwriting's getting scrappy now. for laptop. Hang on, you need to slow down because we had a couple I haven't written down here yet. What was an IKEA?
An IKEA zip-up storage box, which
what are you going to use that for? The laptop?
That's apparently ideal for your laptop.
Mm. Okay.
If your clubhouse has a player's balcony, apparently that's quite good because it's open, covered, but enough space to observe the 2 metre rule.
That's a really good idea because at the moment players are being asked to come ready changed and they're not allowed to use the changing rooms. So a player's balcony at the moment is a great place to be because you'll have a good view up there.
Contacting the away scorer beforehand so you can discuss your individual requirements and what you're comfortable with and that sort of thing.
Excellent. You see, I knew you lot would have lots of tips for each other. I'm going to run her out of room on this screen. Requirements. Can you read this? Hopefully. Is my handwriting with this decent enough to read? Contact us to discuss requirements.
Just both being outside, which helps diminish the risk.
Yeah.
Obviously that relies on good weather.
Or a gazebo or something, yeah. So did anybody try this last weekend, and if so, was there anything that was disastrous or that worked better? One thing that we haven't talked about is if you're trying to communicate with the other scorer, if you're not sitting together, then turn on end of over checks.
Sorry, I've just seen a good one. If you're looking for a portable bubble, try your car.
Oh, hang on a minute. Hang on. Why is that doing
that? The car suggestion's been improved by you can use the headlights to signal the umpire.
But you'd all have to sit in different cars. You couldn't both sit in the same car. I'm going to put that in there. Acknowledge. Okay. Anything else? What's going on? Club to provide parasols. Andy, not until your battery is flat and you can't get home. Love that. Parasols for tables outside. Ooh. I've just leant on them. Don't do that.
It's been pointed out just in a point against sitting outside that if you're inside the box, then that helps distance you from players who gather around you and maybe not observing social distancing properly.
But if you rope as somebody else said, if you rope it off, then you'd like to think that they would respect you. I've got to the bottom of that. Anything else that I can go up to the top of the page with before we move on?
It's been suggested that if the two scorers are sitting far apart, discuss between you and the umpires one scorer to signal back, so that the umpires don't get confused that way. If you don't have walkie-talkies,
one scorer to acknowledge. Now,
to keep players at bay, an electric fence.
I think that could be a tad extreme. Have there been any suggestions about how to operate the score board? Because I think that's going to depend on what type of scoreboard it is. So if you're put in a box and you're pulling strings, I would recommend minimal scoreboard scores. So we're down to RunsWktsOvers. And only have one person pulling the strings.
People have mentioned a few times just remote scoreboard control. I'm assuming that's electronic only, though.
Okay. Single person scoreboard update, I'm going to put.
Yeah, if you can designate that to one person the whole time.
Yeah, remote scoreboard updating. Marvellous.
We've had another upvote for discussing before, not just before the match, but before arrival.
Okay. Use a separate portable scoreboard, says Andy. So the separate portable scoreboard, I've heard that suggested before, but to me, that's more... You've got to handle it. If you've got those little scoreboards where the numbers flip over, you've still got to touch them. I guess it's better than pulling strings, but you've still got to touch it. So you still need a single person to be doing it. Don't get lots of different people to operate the scoreboard. It's got to be single person.
If you're scoring off PCS Pro, you could bring along a second monitor and have that up. Outputting as a scoreboard, so players wouldn't be able to see that, but at least the people waiting around could see that, so they don't have to interact with you too much to get the score from you.
I like that. Polly says all wearing gloves.
I guess that's for if you're doing the scoreboard and you need manual scoreboard and you need to rotate, you could have a supply of disposable gloves, I suppose.
But they're only as good as effectively one use. You can't put gloves on and then keep touching the things. You're just going to transfer something off the board to elsewhere via the gloves. It would have to literally be a new glove every time you touch the board.
No, but if you've got to change every 6 overs or whatever, one person uses gloves and then the next person comes along and uses their gloves, and as long as you don't touch your face.
Yeah, okay.
If you had to have multiple people doing the scoreboard, that might be one way of just mitigating it slightly, I guess. Another person backing up the idea of making sure that the umpires know which scorer to be acknowledged if you're not sitting together.
Yeah.
And another person saying that the second monitor idea, they did that on Saturday and that it worked well for them.
Oh, excellent.
We've had a suggestion of using text messages if you haven't got something like walkie-talkies to hand.
Yeah.
And Malcolm saying that gazebos work better than parasols.
Ooh. Have I got gazebos on there? I don't think I have. Because I might have thought...
They sort of come under tents, don't they?
I'm going to still put them on there. If that's how you spell them. Right, we filled the screen, which is really good. So hopefully anybody else who's watching this back at another time will get some good tips for that, and maybe one or two of you can take those on board when you go to your club. You can take some of those ideas with you to see if you can make a safe environment. Alison's saying disinfect everything, and she's right. So I will put, if I can get to the top with this pen, I will say disinfect everything. Disinfect everything first, and when you're finished, first and last, and 10 times in between. But that's really important.
Somebody's mentioned about encouraging captains to make known their team selections basically as far in advance as possible, so you don't have to deal with team sheets, and also just sort of brings down the amount of interaction that you have to have with the different captains as well.
Yeah, and for that to be communicated other than on paper. So if a captain has completed a team sheet, they could take a picture of it and send it to you rather than give you the piece of paper.
Or if possible, in play cricket.
Okay, I'll put electronic team sheets. And if I can write on the very bottom, play cricket team selection. Doesn't like writing on that bottom line.
And there's been a mention of getting your own key for the scorebox if you don't already have one, and I think that could be spread to other things as well. Anything that you can have your own one of that item, so you don't have to share items like keys.
Okay. Okay, so I'll just put up here own kit. So whatever it is, yeah, you're right. You need to have your own one of it.
Wall-mounted alcohol dispensers. I think he means sanitising, not a bottle of vodka.
Oh, bottle of gin in the scorebox. I'm going to that club.
And if you a top tip, I think. If your club registers for Cricket Force this season, you will receive some PPE. Yes,
I noticed that earlier. That was the part of the communication that came out. They were sending out bottles of sanitizer. Yeah, that is a good one. I haven't got room to write that on the screen. But that's more of a club idea, I think, than a scorebox idea. Right, I think... Go on.
I just thought this one was interesting. One team's been using Zoom chats to brief players beforehand.
Oh, right. Excellent. Right. I'm going to move on because we haven't finished discussing yet. So I am going to move on to the next one. So some of this actually you've already covered because ECB ACO say they've got a section sort of on communal kit. Don't share anything, which you've already come up with on the previous slide. So get your own version of everything you can. Communal scorebooks should be avoided. That's repeated from the ECB instructions. Scorers will not hold any item of players' clothing, sunglasses or any valuables. You know how it is that people go out to bat and leave their phone on your table, so don't hold on to anybody else's kit. Don't help collect or handle the team subs. And if walkie-talkies are being used, usage should be kept to a minimum and only used by one of the two scorers and obviously sanitised before use. What other kit do you share or have to handle? I think we've covered a lot of that, but if you do have any other suggestions of communal kit that needs to be avoided, then we'll put it on the screen. So I'm just going to write in there while answers come in. Walkie-talkies.
while we wait for suggestions to come in, it has been suggested that gloves seem to transfer lurgies much better than hands.
Oh.
So maybe if you've got to share something like scoreboards, which obviously is disencouraged, but if you have to, then lean more into the regular hand sanitizer sort of line rather than gloves.
Yeah. Mike Turner saying, I found it very hard to explain to players why they couldn't leave stuff with me. Yeah, no, they're so used to it, you're right. Richard says extension leads. So yeah, get your own extension leads. Get your own absolutely everything.
There's been a suggestion about subs, which I guess scorers quite often will end up being the people who collect subs. So if you can do that digitally, try and do that. Okay. Helen Miller is suggesting the Slate app.
Ooh. I'll put collect money digitally on there. I think if players are going ready changed, they will have fewer items that you need to look after.
But try and encourage them to leave them in their cars. I know that doesn't work for, say, car keys, but that's a lockable space that most people will have with them.
Okay, Keith's making a reference to DLS, but I'm coming on to that in a minute. Walkie-talkie, mark one with a sticker so you know it's yours, not to have to sanitise, it's just an extra precaution. I would still say you do need to sanitise it, Inga, but I like the idea of marking kit as yours. So mark kit with stickers so you know what's yours. That's a long sentence. Anything else, Luke, while I'm getting
that? Discourage people from borrowing your things like pens.
Yeah. Definitely.
There's been a question about, is there any advice about printing? For example, DLS tables. I don't
in a minute.
No.
What has somebody seen in action? That's saying it's a good point. If it's a good point, I want it on the screen. Oh, I've seen them in action, Polly. I've used them, highly recommended.
I think that might be in reference to having a supply of linear scorebook.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yes, no printing, I think. Yeah, we'll come on to DLS in a minute. So I think we've probably exhausted then the communal kit. Oh, I pressed previous, not next. So now we are moving into rain. And the ECB ACO comment about rain, first of all, is in the event of rain, scorers should either remain in the scorebox if that's where they're sitting, or return to their own vehicle if there is insufficient outdoor cover to maintain social distancing. So basically, are we happy with that? Anything else that you can add? Yeah, it was okay. It was about lending equipment. Yeah, okay.
Earlier on, there was a lot of talk about things like really useful boxes. If you're using something like that to guard the sun off your laptop, that automatically becomes a nice little waterproof thing to quickly pack your stuff into.
Yeah.
Tents making a return.
Yeah, tents. Would people be happy at going to sit in their own car if it rains? I guess you would. It's just a bit of a lonely place, but I guess that's what we have to do. But yeah, go and sit in your own car. Yeah, okay. Not much more to say on that then. So let's move on to DLS.
There's not a solution, but it's worth pointing out that when it rains, it can be tricky. That all the places that you as the scorer might naturally go to shelter, that everybody else is going to go and shelter there.
Right, I'm going to write then, keep players out of your shelter then. You're right, because you do need to keep them out.
And Polly's pointing out possibly the ECB haven't entirely thought it through, in that it depends where the car park is. Not every ground will have a car park in a suitable location.
Well, I don't think they mean for you to score from there as such, but it's just that if there's no room in the clubhouse, because the clubhouses aren't open, and you'd need to be keeping out of anybody's way, even if you've got to walk back there temporarily. But you're right, I mean, where the cars are does need to be thought of.
Alison pointed out that she had an issue going to a ground and using their toilets. As the only woman official, there weren't really suitable toilet facilities that were COVIDified. And
right.
Maybe
so
it's worth scoping out other situations. I don't know really what to suggest there.
The toilet tent is coming back to mind.
Because running across the road to the pub isn't really even an option now.
Check toilet facilities before visiting. Toilet facility.
Coming up with a method, if you have to run off to hide in your car in a car park a while away, making sure that you've come up with a good system for being informed that the game is restarting. You don't want to be left sat in your car while the game's gone on and nobody's told you.
Okay, so we've got some definite things there to consider. So now, if we move on to DLS, in the ECB ACO guidance, let's read this first, and then we'll argue about it. I'm not sure who wrote this particular part of the guidance. Leagues using DLS will be advised to ensure that alternative arrangements are in place to calculate the result in the event that the DLS pass score tables cannot be produced electronically. That would be normal anyway. Doesn't matter whether it's in these difficult times or not. But it goes on to say scorers should ensure that they have pen and paper to produce the necessary manual calculations, and the outcome should be verified verbally with the umpires. Well, I'm not taking pen and paper to do Duckworth-Lewis calculations on the fly. Rest assured. I'm moving on for that because I will come back, because I suspect the chat window will be quite busy in a moment with that statement. Where Scorer Pro is being used, scorers can produce the relevant pass score table and save it as a PDF that can be emailed to the captains, yes. And where DL Standard is being used, the captains should be encouraged to use the apps to calculate the DL pass score, which I'm assuming they mean do it themselves. Now, I've put some comments underneath here. Are you really going to do manual calculations? The only manual calculations you can do are standard ones. So if you normally use DLS, you've got to do it manually, you're going to end up with a different target score because you'll be using the standard ones. You're also going to need more than pen and paper. You're going to need a calculator, and you're going to need the standard tables. You cannot just do calculations manually. The only thing you can do manually is to do all the percentage resources available using the standard tables. So I really think that first statement needs to be ignored. I'm sorry, ECB ACO. The standard tables will produce different answers. You need to be aware of that. Now, I would say try and persuade the teams to only have a target score calculated and not to have pass score tables. There is enough else to worry about at the moment. So do they really need to know the pass score every over? I would try and persuade them not, and say, right at this moment, just deal with a new target score. So I've got a whole screen. Does anybody want to comment on DLS? And Mike turned around and said, thank goodness I know it wasn't Sue that wrote that. Yes, Mike, I am not going to encourage anybody to do manual calculations at a game. I know some do, but I'm not going to encourage it.
While we wait for comments to come through, I will just point out that Alison came back and said that I got the wrong end of the stick. Her club had actually been very good to her and given her own toilet.
Oh, excellent.
So just have to address that.
Polly is saying a DLSMM should be used, and she's correct. The regulations will say that, but I'm afraid in club cricket there's very rarely a DLSMM. But I will write that in here because it is official and that's what it should be. A DLS match manager. Oh, because it should be calculating. I'm also going to add an idea of my own in here, and that is that you should have a backup person, which could be you could have the DLSMM at home, a backup person off site who can just do the calculation for you. They can have the software at home with their own computer, and if all you're doing is asking for a target score, then they can do that target score. They could produce a pass scores table and email it to you, or send it as a PDF via text. But to have somebody sitting at home that you can call on, I think would be a marvellous thing. Right, anything else that's coming in that I need to make a note of? Ooh. Yeah, John's saying, if it rains, my guess is players will abandon rather than sit around in cars. I'm going to put that in as a jolly good suggestion.
There's a lot of support for not doing manual calculations. Excellent.
Please ignore that statement in those guidelines. Relay pass scores to umpire via walkie-talkies. Yeah, you could do. I'm still thinking that in club cricket, do you really need a pass scores every over? Relay. Pass score to umps via walkie-talkie. Oops. Pre-match with this discussion with all officials to ensure we all know what to do. Yes. Very good. Who said that? Sarah Seabright. Thank you. Pre-match discussion. To agree procedure. Excellent. Nobody's complained that they can't read this writing, so I guess it must be okay. I'm getting used to it now. Sue, can you relay our thoughts to the relevant people at ECB? Yeah, we're having a scorers meeting soon. I will pass it back. Colin, it is possible to get a gadget to charge laptop from car cigarette lighter. That's very true, but you'd still have to have the engine running, I guess. Could use pro average run rate. You could. Or factored, yeah. So maybe use another method this season. With no promotion and relegation, I can't see why on earth they would want pass score tables. And I'm all in favour of scoring to what the match requires, not to the level that you can do. We can all do a phenomenal amount of statistics and scoring extras, but we just need to keep this sensible. So I'm going to put that in there, is do the minimum for the game. Nobody's going to think bad of you if you don't produce pass scores and all sorts of things. Okay, I can't see any other suggestions at the moment. I only have a cigar lighter in my car. Okay, James. I have a large power pack that charges my laptop and my phone as I use a hotspot for the internet. Okay, that's not really to do with DLS, so I might put that on a later screen. If weather forecast is for no rain at all, maybe agree not to show DLS. Andy, that's a really good suggestion. Agree to only use DLS in rain. Well, or in interrupted matches, which might not be for rain. Agree to only use DLS in interrupted games. I think that's a marvellous suggestion. Okay, so that covers everything that was in the guidelines, but is there anything else that you can think of that you've been worried about and that somebody else might be able to help you with, or that you came across last weekend when you were doing some scoring? So Renee says take a power pack. Charge kit. I'm just going to put kit on the end rather than laptop and phone. Don't look after spare balls. Yes, very important, says Paul.
Tip on keeping your laptop going all day. Turn your brightness down and disable anything like Wi-Fi or Bluetooth if you don't need them. On no pass score tables, it would be very helpful if the ACO could put it out to leagues where the rules are actually laid down.
That would have to come from the ECB. The ACO have no authority over the leagues whatsoever, but they could suggest it, I guess, to ECB. Laptops turn brightness down.
A chap by the name of Markham used to produce a weather shield which accommodated an A3 book with a perspex shield.
I wonder, is that Ray Markham? I don't know. You'd have to lift, I guess, the perspex. So I'll put perspex shield for the scorebook.
There's a suggestion that it's a brand called Max Oak, Max with 2 X's. They make something similar that is available via Amazon.
Oh, what was that? Max Oak?
Yeah.
2 X's?
Yes.
Oh, now I've got to use this eraser. Oh, look at that. Oh.
As there may often be a single scorer, keep a simple ball by ball manual record to self-check your computer score. There's some concern that in matches where there are no scorers now, that there'll be no alternative but to share the scorebook. I would suggest you could use the PCS app, and then you can pass it off to other people and not share devices, or at the very least, if you have to use a communal iPad, that's a lot easier to disinfect between people than a scorebook.
So if there's no scorers and it's the players, then I guess.
Yeah.
Or one team score in one book and the other team score in the other book, and then just take a picture of it.
Sorry, that Max Oat brand was for the Power Pack, not for the shields.
If no scorers, one team does each book.
Alison suggested that it was helpful to have a family member on standby to pass her things like tea from a flask. But it might be a good point that if you're short of a scorer and there's somebody that you live with that could be pressured into being your second scorer.
Luke. Take Luke in the scorebox with you. Can I write take your own Luke?
Maybe just say your own family member or member of your household, because it might not necessarily be family.
Take your own I'm going to say bubble member, because people I think will be used to that terminology now. Bubble person. As additional scorer / helper. Ooh. Disinfecting iPad is a good suggestion, thanks Luke. So this was again if no scorers. What did you say?
If there's no scorers, if the player's doing it yourself, then using the PCS app. If you have to pass the iPad between people, that's a lot easier to disinfect than a scorebook between people.
Disinfect device before passing to next person. No, Polly, your husband would still come and help you though. Shall I ask my wife to accompany me? No, I don't want to be divorced. No, fair enough. Okay. So I think we've got a lot of good ideas here, and I hope that it's given you food for thought. So there's been loads of things that I wouldn't have thought of that we've put up on the screen. You'll be able to look back at this because the writing will be there in the recording. So you can look back at any time to see some of the items that we've added in here. And if anybody gets any other good ideas that they think of afterwards, or from more scoring over the coming weeks, then you can send them in to RunsWktsOvers@gmail.com, and we will then put them either on the channel or we will put them on the Twitter feed. You can put them straight on the Twitter feed, actually, if you want to, if you've got photographs. So as you go around adapting your scoring areas, do please take some pictures of it. Do please feed them in, because it will give others food for thought, and we will try and incorporate as many of those as we can. So really all I've got left to say is enjoy your scoring. Cricket is back, enjoy your scoring, but do stay safe and only return to scoring if you are happy to do so. I don't want to put a dampener on the happy thought of the cricket's returning, but there is a risk. There is always a risk when we go out and mix with other people at the moment. So please only do what you're happy doing, and only return to scoring if you are happy and safe to do so. One other thing before we leave today is that this is going to be the last of the regular Wednesday evening slots. So cricket is returning, and it's returning for me too. So next week I have a 3-day game which incorporates Wednesday. So therefore I will not be back in time to do the Wednesday slot. And with everybody's cricket turning or coming back, I think that you will have more time now to talk cricket with others that you score along with. I won't say this is the last session, because I'd like to think there will be some more, but don't expect one every Wednesday evening from now on. So stay tuned to the RunsWktsOvers Twitter feed, and I will let you know when I'm around and when we've got some subject matter and a space to talk in. But I really would like to thank you all for staying with me on these Wednesday evenings. We've had some great fun doing them, and I hope they've been very useful to you. So enjoy your scoring, and thank you very much.